Welcome back to another episode of Innovation Minutes Live.
Yeah,
What are we talking about
we are talking future of work. There was an interesting article in the New York Times this past week, and it was looking specifically at how artificial intelligence revolution and extreme automation of many jobs that used to be done by individuals is going to affect the future of work. And it also gets into how some Silicon Valley individuals are playing around with giving a monthly allowance to people in developing countries and seeing how that affects entrepreneurship and the economy there. We won't get into that, though we can link to the article, and I think it's worth checking that out because I think it's a really amazing program that looks at cash over aid. But for our purposes, we'll talk about the future of work from both the US and a global scale as a result of Silicon Valley automation. I mean, we've seen a huge change the last several years.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is the article, that the timing was really interesting and appropriate. Just given everything that happened with the election and the rise of this populist idea of the jobs left and we need to bring the jobs back, and a lot of that, I feel, resentment was probably placed on immigrants and people not from the country coming in, and then at the same time jobs being offshored for cost reasons. But I think one of the big things, and this has been talked about in a few articles, and I think we even mentioned it a couple of weeks ago, is that how much of a role automation has kind of silently played in making a lot of those jobs go away. So when Trump gets up there and says we're going to bring the jobs back, some of them that have been offshored and some of them that have been taken by immigrants could possibly come back. But there's a whole segment of those jobs that have gone to robots and AI that just aren't coming back, and jobs like the ones that have been replaced by automation will continue to go away. And I think that's something that that was addressed, and we need to be able to openly talk about.
And one thing the article didn't offer, and I'm not sure we have an answer to this, is a solution to that. How do we retrain and train a workforce going forward so that there are other options for them? I mean, we've chatted about some banking and financial services clients that we've worked with who mention that, and this is not with ill intentions, but just that human labor is expensive, and the more they can automate things, the better it is for their bottom line. And it's not just financial services that operates like that, but this is the mentality. And so, what happens to those individuals? And how do we make sure that they're still given the opportunity to actively, productively contribute to the economy and to make a living?
Yeah, I think there's a couple forces at play here. Number one, corporations exist to make money, right? That's their sole reason for existing. So if they're not pursuing means to make more money, then they're doing a disservice to their shareholders. So that's kind of the driving force. But you bring up a good point, and I think it's also something that Elon Musk, who has mentioned in the article, has also said in the past. Is he's basically of the mind that if a company invents an AI or creates an AI or nurtures it, whatever the terminology is, do they then own it, right? If it is a true artificial intelligence, can it be owned, right? So and all of the profit, say it's an AI that crunches financial numbers and makes a lot of money in the market. Who owns that, right? This is the corporation, the sole owner of that, because they helped to bring this AI into existence. I don't know if we can answer that question, but it's interesting to think about.
Yeah, we're definitely in uncharted territory, and I think we have a generation of workers who, of course, are rightfully frustrated that the way that they've made their living thus far is largely becoming an extinct option. And so there's tackling that issue, but then there's also looking into the future and thinking about how people can contribute going forward. in terms of the next generation. And one of the things the article pointed out is that in some of these developing nations where they are giving the allowance, they are investing in things that you might imagine. They're becoming largely entrepreneurs because they're still fishing or farming. They still need to go to hair salons. There are services that are still needed. And so individuals who wouldn't originally have the startup capital really, to launch those small businesses are now finding that they can. And individuals who didn't previously consider themselves to be entrepreneurs are now going that route. And so maybe our conclusion is, and I'd love to know what our viewers think, maybe the conclusion is that we are creating a culture of everywhere entrepreneurs where people are being empowered to rethink their lives and their professional pursuits more in entrepreneurial terms. I mean, that may be where we see ourselves headed.
No, and I think, kind of the open question and one that remains to be really answered is how we best go about that, right? There's lots of different models. There's the, what we call entitlements here in the US, which is some level of social safety net. There's what some of the other countries have done, like Australia, I think, you had mentioned, where everybody is basically guaranteed a living wage. And then, I think even if you look back into the not too distant history of the United States, right around the time of the Industrial Revolution, we put a lot of money into taking all these farmers and people who were participating in jobs that were lost due to the Industrial Revolution. And we basically supported getting everybody a high school degree, which at the time was a pretty big accomplishment. And, you can look at the 30, 40 years after that and see the impact of it, right? That was a time of huge growth in the United States. And I think we're kind of reaching the tipping point that we really need to take another hard look at that and say, okay, maybe it's time to get everybody in this country a graduate degree.
Yeah.
And think about creative ways to do that, not just start handing out free tuition, but be creative about how we approach that, so that people can start to make smarter decisions with respect to what it is they're going to do for the rest of their lives.
Yep. I think the bottom line is the future of work looks very different than what we've known thus far. And the workforce, how they would segment themselves, and the kinds of work they'll be doing, that looks a lot different. And I think while that adjustment period, of course, is going to be clunky, just like any transition period, I think ultimately, just like the way I know we view entrepreneurship and approaching things as entrepreneurs, it can actually be very liberating and empowering, I think, for future generations, if we develop the infrastructure and invest in these individuals. So we want to know what you guys think about this topic. Are there any creative solutions that you've heard either in practice or some theories that are floating around? Anything your companies are doing as they potentially downsize the human workforce? Find us and let us know what you think. And we'll be back again next week.
All right.